We are again with our space game. This video, I think what we're actually going to do is what we might call a bit of housekeeping or a bit of cleaning up. We're going to make a few subtle changes to the game itself, but more importantly we're going to do some cleaning up of our code before we move on to add some new features in the next videos. So at the moment, again, just to recap, we are currently at a point where we have our ship that flies up and down. We can shoot, we can destroy enemy ships, and of course we know we can also be destroyed by an enemy ship. So what is it that we will actually do? Alright, so the first thing we're going to do is a bit of cleaning up and a bit of adjusting. So the first thing is I'm actually going to just move this ship back a bit. Because we don't actually fly backwards and forwards at all, I want to move the ship right near the left-hand side of the screen, giving us the most amount of time for an enemy ship to be flying across, so we've got time to move up and down and actually shoot them. The second thing I want to do is to change the speed of the player. So again, in our key up and key down, we have the movement, or the amount that we're moving by. And I want to actually increase that. So instead of being 5, I think we might go with a value of 10. But before we do that, we're actually going to make it a little bit more robust in its code. So instead of having an actual value here, we're going to start creating some variables to hold these values, and that way we can change them more efficiently if we want to in the future, especially if we want to change them while the game is playing. Because at the moment that value is what we would call a hard-coded number. It can't be changed except in this design mode, whereas if we maybe assign that to a variable, that value can be changed while the game's playing. Maybe we get a power up or something happens, we can either speed up or slow down our ship. So how do we go about that? So again, in our player here, we've got a create event, and currently that create event just has our can shoot variable. What we're going to do here is add a second variable, which we will call, maybe we'll call it move speed. And if we were going to just keep everything the same as it is now, we could make that equal to the value 5. Now, at the moment, it's just a variable, it has a value of 5. It doesn't do anything, of course, by itself. But what that essentially means is anywhere that we currently have that value 5, which is how much they're moving by, we can replace that with our variable. So it's literally the same as saying whatever the value is for that variable, use that in the equation. We keep that takeaway there because it's we want it to go up the screen for the up, and here we have our down, and we're going to say move speed as well. So the benefit here is playing a game, nothing has actually changed. It's still going to move up and down exactly the same way it has before. We'll just see that. So still moving at the same speed. But now if I want to sort of test out some new speeds and see what's happening, I don't have to go change it in 2 places. I can just adjust it here in one spot, and now that will obviously work now in both the up and down wherever we refer to this variable. And as I said before, the real benefit is we can now change that value in code if we wanted to. So we won't do that today, but we can certainly do that in the future, so that we can actually change the speed of that ship's movement while the game is playing. Okay, so that's one little bit of cleaning up that we're going to do. The second one that I'd like to do is in the same idea, is the speed that our bullets shoot. So at the moment we have in our alarm, so actually in our space event first, we have the value that we set for our alarm, and that alarm, remember, is controlling how quickly we can reshoot. So the alarm goes off, we reset the can shoot value to be true so that we can do this section again. So same thing, instead of having the number 30 here and never being able to change it, let's go back to our create and we'll set a shoot speed. Now, I'm not going to use a multiple of 30 here. I'm going to make it a little bit more readable, and I'm just going to talk about it in terms of seconds, basically. So I'm just going to put a 1. Now, what that means is I'm going to go back to, first of all, my spacebar, and I'm going to, instead of saying just the value 30 there, I'm going to say 30 times shoot speed. The multiplication symbol in programming is usually the asterisk, not an X, the asterisk. So again, we've already said that 30 is how many steps in roughly a real second, and we're going to use shoot speed to represent how many seconds. So we're essentially saying 30 times 1, which of course is still 30. If we increase our shoot speed to say 2, that would essentially be the same as saying 30 times 2, which would be 60, giving us a 2-second alarm. If we want to go less than a second, then we can simply put a fraction, so maybe 0.5 or 0.1 for a tenth of a second. So again, it gives us the ability to change this value in the game. So we have to change it here, but also we have to change it in the alarm. No, we don't, sorry, because of course we're not doing that. We're just resetting it there. That makes no sense at all. So we actually, only have to do it in here. Now I don't want to go to speed of 30 anymore, so I will actually come back and I am going to put this at 0.5. So essentially it would become 15, so half of 30, 0.5 of 30. So that's going to speed up our shooting. And we should be able to see that happening here. So you can see our bullets are coming up that little bit quicker. So that's going to give us a bit more flexibility. We can get up and down our screen a bit quicker. We can hopefully get to those ships a bit quicker and actually shoot them and score some points, which will come later. So that's a little bit of housekeeping so far. There's another few bits of housekeeping I'd like to do. The first one, though, is actually something new to us. Now, it's not entirely new because we've been seeing it but haven't been really talking about it, and that is code commenting. So whenever we've started a new piece of code in an event, you will notice these green pieces up the top, and these forward slashes represent that this line is a comment, which means it's something that's there in the code that you can read, but when the game is actually played, nothing on this line is actually interpreted by the program. It's just ignored. So the idea here is that we can write comments that explain what code does, so that when we come back and we're looking at it another time, we don't always remember what and how we did things or why we did it that way, so we leave ourselves comments. So I'm going to start commenting my code now, and I'm going to ask that you probably do the same thing, because as the code gets more complicated, it gets harder just to tell. So I'm going to tell myself what each of these variables represents. So this is, can the player shoot at this time? All right. The next one is how fast the player moves and how fast the shooting can happen as a multiple of 1 second. Now that last little bit was important for me because remember we did that little bit of math, so we multiplied by 30. So 0.5, if it was just 0.5 by itself, would be super fast, but it's actually 0.5 of a second. So it's important that people know what this means. These ones up the top, you can just leave for now. We may talk about what this means and why we've got triple slashes here at a later stage. But basically, we're going to start commenting our code. So in the same sort of way, let's have a look at a few of the other bits of code we had. So in here, we might just simply put restart the game. All right, so a little bit of code just to remind us what's going on. The alarm, same thing. We can put a little bit of code in here, or sorry, a comment to explain it. Reset the can shoot so that, oops, I can't spell, that we can shoot again. So you get the idea that we're basically commenting what's going on. so that we don't get confused later. This one here, we'd probably do something like check first if we are allowed to shoot. Okay, and then this would be something like create the bullet where our ship is, and then something like set the value, oops, so that we can't shoot again, and then set the alarm so that we will be able to shoot again later. So hopefully you're getting the point now. We start commenting our code so that it's very clear to us why we've done things. Now, you don't have to necessarily comment absolutely every single line, but I would certainly suggest that if there's something about that line or that command that you don't 100% get, or you're sort of like, oh, I'm not sure if I'll remember that, then you definitely should comment it. There's absolutely nothing wrong with commenting. Well commented code is really, really useful. It makes it a lot easier when you come back weeks or months or even years later to something and go, that's right, I was thinking about it this way at the time, and I understand why I did it that way. Doesn't mean you might not change it, but at least you'll hopefully understand why you did something the way you did. So I'm not going to go through all of them in the video, but I would certainly encourage you to, at this point, go back through every bit of code that we've written so far and make those appropriate changes. One more change that I will quickly make, though, will be in, or two more, sorry, will be in the enemy. So again, we're going to set a speed variable for, oh no, we've already done that. Good, a speed variable for the enemy player. So here we have it already set in the create, so we've actually done that already. And in the enemy controller, okay, we set in the create the time of how quickly the enemies come in, but let's actually make a variable here as well. So let's call this respawn. Most people are familiar with the term respawn, so how quickly something comes back. And again, let's do this as a value of a second. So let's go with 2 because that's what we were doing. And again, in the vein of what we're doing, let's comment this. Rate of respawn for the enemies as a factor of seconds. All right. And for this to work, we now have to use this value in here. So instead of saying 60, we're again going to say 30, which is how fast our game runs, basically, multiplied by our respawn, respawn lowercase rate, which gives us the same value, but at least now we're using the variable. We do have to change it in this alarm code though. So here we have where we reset the alarm so that it can create another bad guy. So it's going to be 30 multiplied by respawn rate. Can't spell. And just get rid of that 60 there. Whoops. Okay, so we've ended up at the same point. So our alarm is still resetting. And again, that means that we can change the respawn rate for the enemy controller, and that way we can make the bad guys come in sooner or faster or slower as the game's playing. So let's just double check we haven't caused any problems. We haven't maybe had a typo or some other bug that we've created. Again, for the most part, we shouldn't see anything really different about the game at the moment. We did, said, speed up the ship and the shooting, but our enemies are still coming out at roughly the same rate. So yeah, we haven't actually made any fundamental game changes or gameplay changes, but we've made a lot of good back-end changes that's going to make it easier for us to do things in the future. So again, as always, go off and make these sort of changes if you need to. Certainly start commenting your code. I encourage you, as I said, to go back and re-comment everything that you've done so far. And from now on, I'm certainly going to be commenting the code in my videos, and I'm going to suggest that you do the same moving forward as well. Next video, we will add some new features to the game. It won't just be a cleanup one anymore, but this was an important step because as you start writing the code, you start making decisions that you kind of go, wasn't the best option at the time. And it's always good to take a step out away from your code for a moment, think about it, go back and make some changes if need be, and make it much more robust and usable down the track. So hopefully that's made some sense, and see you next video.